Welcome back to the channel, folks. Today we're going to be talking about It. Welcome to Derry, episode 3. As I've said before, the pacing of the series I think is really fantastic. I'm just super excited. I think the series only gets 8 episodes, but I hope that they get renewed for a second season. I think it's going to be a lot of exciting stuff to come because there's so much source material. But let's get into episode 3. So we go back to 1908, where we see Francis, or Frank Shaw, a young boy at the time who is just enjoying like a roadside circus. So it's one of those things where they have like the carnival, like carnies or freak show attractions, where they have like the conjoined twins, they have a dog-faced man, they have a skeleton man, all of those like weird freaks of nature. So he's just enjoying that. Now, as we're walking around, we do notice, the typical games where you throw a ball at a little clown, obviously a nod to Pennywise. You knock it down, you get a little prize. We also see along that same or within that same scene, you throw a little ball at a turtle, which is also a nod to the book. You throw it, you hit the turtle, you knock it down. Then we see a bunch of slingshots for a nickel. That is also really important. So again, if you are someone who maybe hasn't seen the TV series or the movies or read the books, that's going to be a really important part, because the OG Losers Club, like, kind of, I don't want to say defeats him with a slingshot, but they do get to a point where they kind of scare the shit out of Pennywise. So that slingshot is going to be a really important part coming along in the episode. But we see Francis walk up. There's someone, the ringleader, and he's trying to get everybody to come, step right up and to see the 10 sensational carnival freaks. Now, as Francis is walking up to like the main attraction, we see an old-fashioned clown holding a handful of red balloons, sitting right outside of like a cart, like a old-fashioned like carnival cart. That is a nod to another one of Pennywise's forms, Robert Gray, or Grant rather, or Bob, and obviously that's going to be a nod to Pennywise coming up. And also, technically, we haven't seen Pennywise come up yet, which is why I enjoy the pacing so much. It's all very intentional that we've only seen little nods here and there. But I mentioned in my last video that we're going to see red balloons kind of scattered about. And when Francis walks by, I think he immediately recognizes that's not like a regular like clown. Anyway, he goes into the tent. He sees the dog man. He sees these conjoined twins that are conjoined, I think, by the large intestine, from what I could tell, which is like wild to see. He goes in a little bit further, and he kind of sees in the distance, in the darkness, like a faint shape of a face, kind of. And he's telling him to essentially to step right up, right, to come into the light, which is another nod to Pennywise in the book. But tells him to come into the light, and Francis takes a couple steps further, and then boom, it's the skeleton man. So obviously, Francis is scared as shit, which I would be too, because the fuck? So he runs out of there, like makes a beeline to get out of there, bumps into his dad, and his dad has a little gift for him, a slingshot. So this is really important too, because we will see how that's utilized like a little bit further in the episode. So they talk a little bit, they get into the car, they're driving back down the road, and the car, I think, overheats or something to that effect. And there are some indigenous children on the other side of the road. The kids are there selling water for a nickel, and Francis unfortunately doesn't have enough to get like a bottle of water. And one of the children sees the slingshot and asks, like to just take that in exchange for like the 5 cents, which is kind of wild. Like, that's so crazy. Like, water used to be 5 cents. Anyway, we cut back to Francis and his dad back in the car, and Francis's dad notices that the slingshot is gone. Then we have a little moment where Francis has a flashback or flash forward. I don't know when they met, but with a like an adorable little indigenous girl, and they are running through the grass, running through the weeds, just frolicking as kids do. I think I'm too old to frolic, and like my joints won't allow it, which is totally fine, whatever, cool. But they're running, they're having fun, and then they get a little bit deeper into the woods. This is where things get a little creepy. The adorable little indigenous girl, who we later find out is Rose, sees Francis running deeper into the woods, and she's trying to get him to get like away from the wood because she knows that something is in there. Now, this is like really kind of cool because again, it touches back to a lot of the material, but the thing about Derry is that you never really forget like the experiences there unless you get to leave Derry, right? There's just something really evil, bro, and it's so much bigger than just like Pennywise the clown. It's the entity, and Rose and the other indigenous people, they know that. I also think that too is really important. It comes up later in the episode, but there's something about sacred soil, so you respect the soil. So Rose, the young Rose, is trying to protect Francis. But damn Francis just runs into the woods anyway. Whatever, fine. He doesn't get too deep into the woods until he realizes that he's like lost. And then he hears like noise. He hears a rustling of leaves. And in the distance, he sees the skeleton man. The same skeleton man that scared the shit out of him. Because why? Pennywise is a piece of shit. And anything that really scares the crap out of you, he's gonna use it again. So now Pennywise has taken the form of the skeleton man. And he's darting behind trees and lurking and lurking. And the next thing you know, the skeleton man grows even larger, and then he opens his mouth wide, and these disgusting gums and sharp teeth emerge, and he's chasing Francis out of the woods. So he's right behind Francis. He's on his heels. Francis is freaked out. Francis falls, which, I mean, I get being scared and stuff, but like, run, Francis, run. Anyway, he's running. And then the skeleton Pennywise crab man is bent over backwards, crawling on all fours as fast as he can. And then we hear a pop, and we see the skeleton man get hit in the head with a rock by the slingshot. Rose popped that motherfucker, okay? Which is exactly what I would have done. And then Rose tells Francis to come on, and they get out of there. And they never really forgot it. We then cut to the opening credits. Once the opening credits are done, we find Lily at Juniper Hill Asylum. Now, after all that she did, trying to protect herself, which I totally understand because I'm sure she was incredibly, incredibly scared, she ends up back in the asylum. And something about this too, I think, changes her attitude, at least from my perspective, which we'll see later in the episode. But yeah. Back at Juniper Hill, we see Lily in her room talking with one of the orderlies. This orderly, though, seemed different. She was very sweet, very, very understanding. And Lily is just torn because she knows that Ronnie's dad didn't commit those murders, but she's afraid to tell anybody that it was, a flying mutant baby, which I'd be scared too. But this orderly is tender and sweet and encourages her to tell it the truth anyway, because she says that she'll support her and that she will believe her. Now, in this scene, we see her give Lily a charm for her bracelet, which is a little turtle, again, a nod to the Stephen King original novel. But I thought that this scene was really important for Lily because, as crazy as it all sounds, we're the audience, and we kind of have to put ourselves in the shoes of the kids where, you'd be scared too if you told someone that this murderous mutant baby flew around, killed 3 kids in a movie theater. No one would believe you. So I thought that this scene was just really, really great. And it was very encouraging for Lily. And I think that we're going to see her really build up her confidence and her courage through the series. So I thought this was great. Chief of Police Clint Bowers goes to visit Hank in his jail cell. He's still under a lot of pressure because the citizens of Derry want Hank to be held accountable for what happened. Even though we know that it wasn't Hank, we find out in this episode that Hank can't exactly tell him yet where he was. So again, like we know what happened, but Bowers is just trying to do his job more or less, and he's talking to him. Now, something I noticed, he offers him a cigarette, as you would, especially in that time. And he also offers him a light. If you know from the source material, there was a huge fire at a black-only lounge club called the Black Spot that gets burned to the ground. Lots of deaths, including Hank. So I think that little offering of a light was definitely a nod to something that we're going to see in this series, which is just going to be, I think, too. I don't know what episode it's going to be in, but I think that was going to be like just really, really tense. As I mentioned before, the racial tension is a part of the source material, so it's supposed to be there. Like if you're watching it, you're kind of supposed to sit at home and be angry that Hank is in jail because you know he's innocent. But Pennywise doesn't give a shit. Like Pennywise is going to do all that he can to completely disrupt and disturb this entire community. So we'll see more later in the series, and I'm interested to see how Bowers and Hank Rogan are going to interact later. But just before Bowers leaves Hank, he tells him that he's going to miss him and that there'll be lots of memories of him. Hank then bangs on the bars, like pleading that Bowers just waits a second and listens to him, but he still can't quite bring himself to tell him where he actually was that night. So again, this was like a really intense scene. We find ourselves back at the high school where Ronnie's walking in. Things are really tense for her already. And now that the town knows that her dad's locked up, she walks into school, awkward stares, awkward whispers, murmurs from all of the other kids, to find on her locker written in red lipstick, "Hatchet Hank's gonna get you." This moment killed me. It killed me to see her go through that. It's just, but this is kind of a credit to the writers. The tension I think within this show is really, it's palpable, but it's also really well mounted. I think I said this before, but Ronnie is a fighter. She's a firecracker. She's not going to let up. Um, Nor should she. Like she has to find a way to prove that like Pennywise is real. Like she doesn't like know him by that name yet, but what happened to her that night in episode 2, she knows something's up and she's got to figure out a way to prove that. Then we find Ronnie in the bathroom trying to wash the lipstick off of her hands, and she runs into Lily, offering, an olive branch, or in this case, rubbing alcohol to help Ronnie get the lipstick off of her hands. This interaction is obviously quite tense because Lily is the person who, in no certain terms, told Police Chief Bowers that Hank was the person who did it. So Ronnie's upset. Ronnie doesn't want to deal with Lily and tells her very keenly, "I should have whooped your ass for what you did to my daddy," which I'm very close with my dad, so I probably would have said the same thing. But anyway, next we find ourselves in Frank Shaw's office. They're kind of going over what they found in episode 2 from the dig that Dick Halloran helped with. Here's what I think is happening. there's a lot of like weird things going on the base. And because Frank Shaw still lives in Derry, I think he knows something is happening. Now, obviously, he's the person who experienced the skeleton man in the woods in 1908 as a kid. He knew it was real. Rose knew it was real as well. But they're kind of discussing what they want to do next and how far they want to go. So Shaw is trying to get Dick more supplies, like just more equipment, more resources, because as he says, he's right on top of it. Then, out of the top drawer of like his desk, he pulls out a cigar box. In the cigar box is a slingshot. Not just any slingshot. It is the slingshot that Rose used to stun Pennywise in the woods back in 1908. After this, we cut to Dick Halloran and some of the other airmen just kind of enjoying a smoke, having a laugh. And then Dick is called to go get on the air carrier. Now, Leroy Hanlon is going to be the pilot here. So again, I think I mentioned too before, there's like a camaraderie, and a brotherhood between these two, and not just because of their racial backgrounds or their culture. It's something about that town that literally wants to tear you apart. That's what Pennywise wants to do. He wants to tear you apart. That's the one way that he can vanquish you, is typically when you are by yourself. So we see General Shaw give him the cigar box, but he doesn't tell him what's in the box. Now, I don't know if it's just me. I don't remember whether or not Dick knew what was in the box already, or if he just opened the box in the plane. But either way, what Shaw is doing here is trying to give him a way to strengthen his psychic ability. Now, Dick has The Shining, as we know. This is Dick Halloran, who was also featured in Stephen King's book in the movie, The Shining, and Dick is just in that air carrier, and he knows. Maybe he does know. I'll watch it again just to make sure. But he opens the cigar box, and that is his conduit, right? He's trying to get more information. He's trying to find out how strong his psychic abilities really are. Hanlon doesn't necessarily know exactly where he's going, but he's been told that Dick is going to like help to give them guidance. So once Dick opens the cigar box and sees the slingshot, he kind of hovers over it a bit and tells Leroy to head east. Was this east? I think that's east. Anyway, and he does that. What happens next is kind of wild, though. Now, from there, we cut to a quick flashback of what happens right after Francis and Rose get out of the woods. And Rose asks Francis if he can keep a secret. So this is kind of the ongoing theme of what he does. Like Pennywise or it wants to keep you confined to all of your fears. You never venture too far outside of your comfort zone. Or if you're one of the lucky ones, you get to get out. And if you're able to get out of Derry, like you're typically good, unless of course you are like the adult like losers club, like who had to come back and like try to vanquish Pennywise like for good. But again, this is a really important scene because we cut to Rose in a town meeting. Now we see a good grouping of indigenous members talking about all of the things going on, all of the digging on the military base and like around the military base, all this stuff that's like sanctioned off. And a lot of it is on like sacred soil. So we're talking about just ancestry, and we're talking about practices that really should not be tampered with. So even if the army doesn't really know why or what's going on, the indigenous people in this town, they do. They know whether or not they know that it's it. They know that it's not something that you do. You don't just uproot those kinds of things. So it's kind of nice to see like the conversations being had, because again, like I said, I think maybe next episode or episode 5, I think it's gonna be like super duper wild. But anyway, let's go on. We cut back to the air carrier. Halloran is in a trance. So he's holding the. Nope, just start over. Stop. Okay. We cut back to the air carrier where Dick Hanlon is still hovering over the slingshot, but this time he's entranced. So Leroy is trying to get to like the command center to try to figure out what to do because he can't get through to Dick. Like he's talking to him, he's trying to get him out of his trance, but he can't. The next thing you know, Halloran is up and like he just doesn't know where he is, but he knows that he's having one of his psychic spells. Now, what's really important is this is one of the first times that we get to see it in action in the series. Like we know that it's something that he's talked about, we know that it's something that he naturally possesses, but we get to see it. And then next thing we know, he's in dark. He's encased. He's walking on like puddles of water, and then a big metal door closes behind him. Dick Halloran has been transported to Pennywise's lair. So if you remember in it, Pennywise's lair is basically underneath the sewer or the town of Derry, right? He lives within the sewer grates. So this is where Dick Halloran is, but Pennywise is like immediately onto him, and this was so. It was so cool to see. Like it's one thing to like read it, which is also cool, but to see it. So Dick is in front of this old, the old carny little cat. I don't even know what it's called, but he sees Pennywise's name like painted on the thing, and it's all dingy and dirty and dark. And in the dark, those yellow bright eyes, and Pennywise asks, "Who are you?" And it gets wild from there. Dick sees nothing but floating corpses all the way up to the sewer grate, floating about. We see dingy stuffed animals and broken toys all within the sewage. And then we see Dick Halloran's grandmother. She's urging him to get out of there. Pennywise is not supposed to be like impenetrable. You're not supposed to know where he lives or anything like that. So we're also going to see how this plays into tampering with unknown territory. I think that's another theme that they're going to play around with, because the previous scene was about not disturbing sacred soil or sacred grounds. So I think this was a really cool scene. And yeah, so Dick's trying to get out. He's trying to get out. He's trying to open the door. In real life, what he's doing is opening the emergency hatch. So, like, dude's about to open the hatch and walk the hell out of there because he's still in his psychic trance. And then Leroy has to get up and kind of like come over and shake him out of it, close it up, and then we head to the next scene. So, Dick confirms it. He definitely saw it from the carnival travel-y thing, whatever it's called, to the eyes, to the floating corpses, and he tells Shaw what he saw. So Shaw is remembering things now, and I think it's because like Pennywise has made a resurgence. Keep in mind, what they discovered last episode was that I guess like blood truck, whatever, that had all of the child corpses inside of it. So Sean knows something is going on, and that's the reason why Dick has like special privileges, because he quite literally has a special use too. Like he just has that ability, and so we'll see him sharpen that more and more as the series goes on. But I thought again, this is really, I thought it was really, really well done. Yeah, I thought it was really well done. So, because of how far Dick was able to get, like while he was in his trance, like Dick comes out of it like really freaked out. So he's talking to Shaw, and Shaw is more or less excited about the fact that they're making progress. he saw something very real. And I do like this too, that I like the fact that Shaw recognizes a real talent in Dick. And like, I mean, obviously he's utilizing it for military purposes, but I think that Shaw also knows that this is real. He knows that it's not just like everyday evil. He knows that something is going on in the town of Derry, and he at least thinks that he wants to get to the bottom of it. So again, I think that that was another little interaction that was really important because again, you'll see how Shaw and Halloran play off of each other as the series goes on. Next, we catch up with Will and Rich at a little malt shop, having some fries, having some milkshakes, just talking, enjoying for right now. And they are gently being supervised by Lily's mom, who is a waitress there. Then, pretty abruptly, Lily and Ronnie are banging on the window because they want to talk to Will. Now, the thing about Will is that Will is a science whiz. Will was actually able to even talk about some of the different chemicals that were in the stink bomb from episode 2. And so Lily and Ronnie are thinking, hey, if you know about chemicals, you know about science, how about you help us like develop these photographs, right? Since you know chemicals so well. So this is going to be the start of what I am calling the 1962 Losers Club. I don't remember if they had an actual name or not, but that's what I'm calling them. So okay, bye. Also, my bad, y'all. I don't know why I said 1958 or 62. I meant 1958. Sorry. We catch up with the OG Losers Club at the lookout spot. There, they kind of talk a little bit about what's been going on, all of the craziness, all of the kids that have been missing, all the corpses that were also found at the dig site. And Lily and Ronnie go into the experiences that they had with it. Now, keep in mind at this point, Lily has had a run in. Will has had no, excuse me. Ronnie has had a run in. Um, Rich has he kind of more or less is a spiritual, like he believes in the supernatural, but he has yet to have an experience with Pennywise. And then Will has not had an experience yet either. And I think this is also important because we know that Will is like a science nerd. Like part of what they end up doing later, going to the dark room, they ask Will like, what chemicals can we put together to make sure to properly develop these films to prove that we're not all crazy. They go to Will because Will is the science guy. So I thought that that was a great little intro to what their relationships are gonna be like as like the OG Losers Club. Now back to Rich. Now Rich being of Cuban descent, he talks about his tío who was a babalao, and who practiced Santeria. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what Santeria is, it's an African diaspora religion that developed in Cuba during the late 19th century. So this is kind of it's about like divinity, right? Or at least goes into that. So it is something related to spirits and conjuring. Now, Rich does also mention that not all spirits are bad, but based on what Lily and Ronnie have told them about like their experiences, he figures this one is bad. So the Oricha is what they call spirits in Spanish. And that's another thing that pops up in this episode. And I really like that too because I don't know a lot about Cuban ancestry. So when I was like reading stuff after that, I was like, I kind of know what something is, but not really. So I like the little nod. It is, again, that's also really important as a cultural practice too to kind of understand. And I think that culturally there is a respect to it that that people of color tend to have when it comes to our ancestry. There's a keen understanding and a real appreciation, a rich appreciation for it. So I love that Rich is Cuban and talking about this and like expressing it to the other kids. So yeah. Now, one thing that they do a little bit later here, but you can make offerings to the Oricha. You can make sacrifices if you want to. You can sing, you can drum, you can dance. They're going to do a ritual later in the episode. And again, like there's something in the book called the Ritual of Chud. They do this in It Part 2. But that's going to, I think, be expressed a little bit more as well. So, yeah. So we now find ourselves in the Hanlon household. So Charlotte and Leroy have invited Dick Halloran to come over for dinner. And they're just kind of having, a little like conversation, just very, very casual talk. And Dick is kind of asking how Charlotte is enjoying everything. And Charlotte does allude to something. So Dick asks Charlotte specifically, like, do you, or you, he alludes more so rather. So Dick then alludes more or less or suggests to Charlotte that she doesn't really like it here. Now, this isn't him trying to be like a dick, lol, because his name's Dick. Never mind. But he knows what's going on. And again, we talked about racial tension. We'll talk common theme throughout the series, but he knows that it's not just like the awkward stares from their white neighbors. He can kind of tell that something's a little bit deeper, right? This too is important to me because the adults at some point are going to have to like kind of just reconcile with the fact that things really aren't what they seem, and something has got to happen. Otherwise, there are going to be more children missing, more children murdered. So Dick is alluding to something that is a lot bigger than it might seem. But Leroy notices right away that like the little interaction between him and his wife is off. Well, I don't mean off in terms of like, Dick trying to like hit on Leroy's wife or anything like that. But Leroy can't quite figure out like what the special gift is. Because again, like they were just on an air carrier and Dick's having like a weird moment. He's like feeling around. Next thing you know, he's wandering about. He's opening the emergency hatch and all this stuff. So Leroy, I think, is still trying to make sense of what happened earlier that day. So when Dick and Charlotte are having this interaction, Leroy kind of like, not rudely, but firmly kind of shuts it down. Then they chat a little bit more and then they go to the porch to have a little smoke. Now, Leroy recounts what happened in episode 1 when he was attacked, right? And he tells Dick, I know you were there, right? So now we're talking about Dick's psychic presence. This is again going to be like a recurring theme. Leroy doesn't know quite what to make of it because again, like Dick has the shining, not Leroy. But he knew that Dick was there and he tells him to like stay out of his head. So we're already kind of seeing, one side where General Shaw knows that it's real, believes it, maybe wants to use it for his own personal gain. We're not sure yet. And then his newfound brother, more or less, or his comrade, is more or less like not believing that it's real. But we'll find out again later in the series, like how real it is. Now, one thing to note too within their conversation, Leroy asks him, "Hey, like what happened up there?" And Dick says, "Well, my grandmother said it's seeing things without seeing things." So again, like when he saw his grandmother's body, floating just underneath the sewer grate above all of the other dead bodies in Pennywise's lair, and she told him to get out. We can also see this as another way of how his shining works. I take it he has great respect and reverence for his grandmother. And so when she told him as a young boy that, you know, it's seeing something without seeing something, she probably knew that he had the shining. Now, whether or not they called it that, I believe though, because Dick's from Louisiana, and I believe they really do call it that, like actually in that culture. But yeah, this is another important part of their conversation because I really think that they're gonna like look out for one another once they understand each other a little bit better. But you can kind of tell Leroy is like, boy, what the hell is a shining? So after dinner, we find ourselves in a cemetery with the kids. So they are trying to speak to the Orichas. So they have all of their candles lit. They're sitting in a circle, and nothing's working. Um, According to either Rich's Theo or his cousin, he doesn't really remember. He is maybe doing it correctly, but he's actually not even sure because he's never really done it before, and he received secondhand information from a relative. But after a little bit of time goes by, we see Ronnie and Lily trying to get out of the cemetery. Lily and Ronnie are on their bikes as they're trying to leave the cemetery. Now, at this point, they're pretty sure that it didn't work. The offering didn't work. The words that Rich was trying to remember, like weren't the right words. Will kind of makes fun of him for repeating the same words over and over again, but that's what you're supposed to do. Now, within this too, we kind of see, and this is an important kind of point. The other kids all kind of believe in like the supernatural or like the spirit world kind of in general. Even the things that they can't necessarily explain, they believe it to be real. They either know it to be real from personal experience or they at least believe it. But we know Will to be a science nerd. I mean, it comes up a couple different times. So Will is more of a logical mind. He doesn't really believe it. So he can't quite make sense of like why they're doing it, but he does want to be there to support his friends, which is, kind of obvious. But Lily and Ronnie are trying to get out of the cemetery, right? Now, they brought the camera along with him. Now, the earlier conversation that they had, or part of it in the bathroom, was trying to figure out a way to prove that it was real, like to try to prove that what happened wasn't on Hank. And that wherever Hank was, okay, it wasn't at the movie theater. So they have the camera, it's strapped to them, and then they notice that the exit/entrance to the cemetery is getting further and further away. And they're pedaling a little faster, and it's further and further away. They definitely woke something up when they were trying to do their little ritual, okay? So they're riding. Next thing you know, there's a corpse. There's a floating like zombie corpse. The ground is like shaking. The tombstone there's like a Jesus epitaph that like turns and like like smiles really creepily. The earth starts to kind of fall underneath them. Rich and Will are trying to also get out of there, and then they see it. They see Teddy's dead ghoul body floating around. And what they're trying to do is get pictures to prove that like this is all real. Like nobody made this stuff up. So Lily's able to get a picture, drops the damn camera. Okay. Or no, the camera got snagged by a tree branch. Ronnie is able to get a picture. Cool. Camera falls to the ground. Rich gets a picture. Okay, fine. Lastly, Will. So the reason I brought up Will, being more of a logic mind and not necessarily believing in the spirit world, it makes total sense that the last person to come in contact with the camera is the person who probably believed the least in what was going on. So Will is standing right in front of a crypt. Hears a little noise, takes the camera in there, He goes in there, and then the camera zooms out, and we see a camera flash. So the other three kids, so Lily, Ronnie, and Rich, they make it out to an exit, right? So they're just about home free. They realize Will is not. So, oh my God, did he get captured? Is something gonna happen to him? Like, is he dead? Did Pennywise get him? We see Will come back out. Will has the camera. Okay, fine. Finally, someone did not drop the camera. So the four of them get the hell out of there. Then they make their way to the high school. Where are they going? To the dark room to prove these or to develop these pictures that they took. A really, really cool scene too. I like a lot of just like the camera shots were just really cool. And I think that the ground falling like underneath him and it was like fiery orange and red underneath was just kind of like a nice touch. Kind of like a sadistic sort of take on like fire and brimstone almost, at least to me. I mean, I'm like a deconstructed Christian, so don't judge me for looking at it like that. Anywho, they make it to the dark room. They're developing their pictures. Success. They see Teddy's dead like ghost body. They see Phil. They see Susie. And then the last film, and this picture takes a while to develop. It's this blurry image of a clown. And it's so blurry that we can pretty much assume it's Pennywise, right? Maybe Pennywise in an earlier form, but it's all really blurry except for his eyes. The bright yellow eyes. So now Will is a believer. Like I would be too. But again, the episode's great. The pacing is great. I'm so excited for the next episode. I'm gonna read the book again. I've read it before. It's just been a minute. I'm gonna get back into the book and like see if I can predict some stuff because again, there's so much source material. You know, they can't use like all of it, but this series has me so like intrigued. And I know I was talking shit because I'm like, oh, okay, another prequel. Okay, cool, great, fine. But so far, this is probably one of my favorite TV shows this year. This is some good shit, y'all. So anyway, that's all the time I have for today. Thank you so much for watching. I did as much of this as I could in very few takes. So please appreciate it. Thank you. Like, comment, subscribe, all of the fun things. If you really enjoyed it, you can share it with someone. And other than that, be kind. Don't get in my comment section with no bullshit. Okay, thanks.